Hello, gang, and welcome back to the Unexplained. Tattooed Biker here with you, and tonight I'm sharing some of the most disturbing and terrifying encounters with unknown cryptids and strange beings that, well, I've ever received. Some of these, I could make an educated guess on what they were, but others left even me mystified. So get ready for some high strangeness in Appalachia. Grab your boots, and let's ride to West Virginia. Number 1. Hey, Tattooed Biker. I have an experience that I want to share. Back in 2017, I was backpacking with my brother in the mountains of West Virginia. To get to our destination, we had to drive about 2 hours up a very long and deep-ditched road. After reaching the mountain, we got all our gear out of the car and started our hour-long hike into the woods. Our destination was the edge of a small lake. Behind us was a long path back to the car, which was covered by fallen trees and thick brush. This area was surrounded by high and jagged cliffs. After about an hour of resting, we set up camp and started a fire. We proceeded to cook as the sun was setting over the large rock walls across the lake from us. Just after the sun went down, the strangeness began. Every half hour or so, my brother would hear what he said were soft footsteps coming from the trail behind us. I was really tired and kept blowing it off as a joke. However, as the night passed on, he refused to stop talking about what he was hearing. I told him to just shut up because I was tired of hearing it. At around 11 p.m., the situation became even more bizarre. I had nodded off with my head propped up on a log. Then suddenly, a large crash was heard from across the lake. My brother and I both jumped to our feet and grabbed our shotgun and .44 Magnum and walked to the edge of the lake to see if we could spot what had made that noise. After a minute of staring into the pitch-black night, we decided to go back and just lay down. We both thought that it must have been a loose boulder that had fallen off the face of the ridge. That was until my brother told me to stop in an abrupt whisper. "Look there," he said, pointing towards the ridge to our left. That was the moment that I realized my brother really was hearing things all night long. About 100 yards away from us, just in the tree line, was a figure that looked to be at least 10 feet tall, with glowing golden eyes. Paralyzed with fear, my brother and I watched as this large figure swayed back and forth, never taking its eyes off of us. "Let's get the hell out of here," my brother yelled while shooting a round from his .44 into the lake. At this point, the figure abruptly stopped and just stared. Its eyes seemed to get larger and brighter at the gunshot. And then, just as quick, the eyes were gone. We immediately started stroking the fire as fast as we could. Not knowing if the figure might return, we decided to stay up all night, taking turns adding logs to the fire. After an hour or so, we heard a faint rustling in the brush. The rustling then stopped, and then all of a sudden, this thing roared out the most terrible scream that I've ever heard. We grabbed up our guns and gear. It was time to leave. We both started a sprint into the darkness with our lights turned off. We ran into the woods for at least 10 minutes until the two of us were out of breath, and then we stopped. We flipped on our lights to find the path and listened for the creature. We could hear it. It was moving towards us. We could actually hear the pounding of footsteps and the branches snapping. This time, the lights stayed on as we ran nonstop, tripping over obstacles until we reached the car. The two of us threw our gear into the vehicle and locked the doors behind us. My brother was literally shaking from fear and fumbling with the keys, and just as he got the keys into the ignition, a loud scream from the creature blasted from the darkness. It was so loud and deep it actually rattled in my chest. He started the car and gunned it out of there. Now, I don't know what the hell that thing was, and all I can say is that I'll never return to those woods to find out. Thanks for reading. Signed, Bill. Number 2. Hey TB, something happened and I just don't know how to explain it, and I wanted to get your take and ask you what you think I saw. It's been over 20 years ago now. My family had relocated to St. Albans, West Virginia. There are so many little details that I'm going to try and cram it all into this one email. Back when I was in the 4th grade, my family relocated there to West Virginia, and we lived kind of at the end of a cul-de-sac. And if you can imagine the kind of place where you are driving in this very quiet neighborhood, and on the right-hand side, the houses were on flat land. Now on the left-hand side, there were about 4 houses that were down over a hillside, and it was just a continuous drop-off of this hillside. These houses on one side were on stilts, and ours was one of those houses. On our first night there, it was at the end of summer, and probably around 9 p.m. The sun was going down, but it was still light enough to where you could still kind of see the outline of things, but not make out much detail. My older brother and I shared a room, and there was a sliding glass door that went out to a deck that was, of course, on those stilts. If you were to walk out on this deck and look over, it's just a straight drop. If you would jump off this thing, you would at least break your legs, your back, and maybe worse. So our first night there, we're getting ready for bed, and the blinds are kind of tilted open a bit. And I heard a knock on the sliding glass door. And my brother said, "Who could that be?" And I just said, "Hey, maybe it's the kid from next door." We had just met earlier that day, and that's what it looked like from the outline. I propped the blinds to the side to look at this person, and I couldn't make them out. There was a body. The person was standing right in front of me, but it was still so dark. The person was just a shadow because I couldn't see who it was, just their outline. So when I kind of opened the blinds and saw the thing, it suddenly hissed at me and put its hands up like it was making claw marks, like it was imitating a cat while it hissed. Then it took a couple of steps back, looked back at me again, got a running start, and completely hurdled the railing of the deck. And that was it. I really didn't think much of it at the time. I keep thinking that what was on the deck that night? And it's crazy and freaky when I think about it. Looking at it now, a human would have easily snapped his ankles landing off that deck, no question. I get chills just thinking about it, man. It just wasn't normal. Signed, Jake. Number 3. Dear Biker, I live in West Virginia, and I have all my life. I don't come from a rich family, and I'm not rich myself. I live in a small, single-wide trailer with my 2-year-old son, outside the town of Gary in McDowell County. My boyfriend is a truck driver and is only home every so often. I'm kind of gotten used to being alone with my son here at night. My closest neighbor is some 3 miles away, and my trailer is set back in the woods. Now this is a mountain town. I grew up hearing scary stories of monsters, but I never actually saw anything growing up. I never saw anything until now, and I want to tell you about it. What people are talking about is most definitely what is stalking us out here, because I know it's not a Sasquatch. I never saw a Sasquatch, but I think I would know if I saw one. So this just started last summer. You see, I clean houses for a living, and I was leaving the last house of the day and had just went up to pick up my son from the babysitters, and we had headed back home. It was 8 p.m. exactly when we turned into the driveway. Now my driveway is a very long sand driveway surrounded by trees and woods on both sides. I hadn't even got to my house when I saw a man jump from one tree on the right side of the driveway to a tree on the left side of the driveway. Like 30 feet up in the air. He just jumped like how a monkey swings from trees. He did this in front of the car as I was still driving slow to get to the trailer. It's bumpy sand on the driveway, so I never go more than 10 miles an hour. At that moment, I wasn't sure what I saw, but I did know that it was a man. I saw its skin, and it had some torn cloth on him too. Arms, legs, all of that a man would have. I couldn't see its face, but I hit my brakes and my son is still in the back seat, almost asleep. I didn't question what I saw or try to make sense of it because I know it was some kind of creature. And yes, I was terrified. My first thought was my son. I only stopped there in my driveway for a second and then went ahead and sped up to go on and get down the driveway so I could get into the house. I'm passing those trees to my left and I'm just looking around to see if it's still there. I don't see anything. I just keep on going and it's about dark, but I can still see a little bit. I see my trailer around the corner up ahead, and then I see movement. Okay, so let me add here that it's not that uncommon for some deer or other animals to be around the trailer. That's normal, but there were people up ahead, and one of them was in my trash can. Now, I don't have trash service way out here, so I sometimes will sit a bag of trash out on my porch and then haul it myself to the dump. So a man was all in my trash. I get closer and these people hear my car and my headlights are lighting up the front area. And I see like 4 of these things run off into the woods. I got a look at one of them pretty good, but it was his face that really got me scared. That thing had dirt or mud all over his face, and there was something wrong with his face because it didn't look right to me. His eyes were way up on his forehead, and he had a hump on his back. It had on some dark pants but no shirt, and the chest and back were covered with thick brown hair. His nipples were huge and dark, and I could see them through the hair. He was barefoot. This was the one that was digging in my trash bag. He ran off too, but he didn't seem to be in such a rush as the other ones were to get back into the woods. I eventually lost sight of them all and waited before I went any further because of my son. I didn't have a gun or anything on me, so I was careful. I sat there in my car for 20 minutes, with it running idle before I drove on up into the house. I grabbed my son and we ran inside, and because of no cell signal down my driveway, I called my uncle once I got inside. My uncle said I was just seeing shit, but he came on out there an hour later and looked around. Lord, I was so scared while me and my son sat here, waiting for my uncle. When he got here, well, he's a big guy and had weapons on him. He investigated. He came back in the front door, white as a ghost. He came in and said that he had saw a devil in those woods, and that I was to grab my son, get in his truck, and then we all were going to get the hell out of here. We never called the police or anything. What were we going to tell the police? And that was last summer. The winter came and nothing, and then just this past March, when my boyfriend was home, we hear scratching at 11 at night on the side of the trailer. A metal sound. He went outside to look, but there wasn't anything there. But he smelled this odor that he described as rotten pig feet. If you eat pig feet, then you know what I mean. We smell bad things a lot, and we see things moving up in the trees. But now my boyfriend will be moving us to another state because of his job, and we only have a few more weeks here, but I know there are some wild, feral clans of people in the West Virginia mountains. Signed, Tammy. Number 4. Tattooed. I have something I want to share. I think it was the summer of 1982. My friend Mike and I used to spend hours on the hills behind my grandmother's house on 48th Street in Benwood, West Virginia, off Route 2. A 4-lane highway and the railroad tracks were right there. Even though Mike and I were just kids, both around 11, we disobeyed our parents and would carefully cross the 4-lane highway. On the other side was what I now believe to be a game trail. no doubt created by deer on their quest for the river. This was the path to our adventure and led to all the cool spots that we would come to enjoy. We climbed that hill and passed our favorite locations, like that little overhang of rock that would shelter us from the rain and provide a convenient place to light a fire. We actually loved building small fires. We were careful, though. I give us credit for that. Good old Smokey the Bear did his job. A little later in our explorations, we found an even larger overhang that would provide shelter from even a storm. This, we thought to ourselves, was where the Indians took shelter. Despite any truth of that statement, we never found any indicators of modern occupation. Don't forget, we were just 11 or 12. Now the forest was beautiful that time of year. Birds were chirping and sunlight streamed through the openings in the forest canopy. I can remember the smell of some wild bush on the land, some aromatic thing floating through the air. I felt good that day, and I was with a good friend. At some point, we deviated from the trail and began to move north along the side of the hill. Keep in mind, we could hear the highway below, so we were able to get through. We went perhaps a few hundred yards and then began to descend. We made our own path through the woods, but soon we would find that path blocked. We saw something hunched over, moving up and down rhythmically. There was no sound except for the creature rustling the underbrush. It looked about the size of a bear, but it was now upright on two legs. We didn't know what to think. My first reaction was to throw my Jolly Rancher at the creature and take off running down the hill in the direction of the highway. I think that maybe Mike did the same, but at that instant, it was all about me. Suddenly, we come to a screeching, screaming halt. There were briars, a whole wall of them, with no clear path around them. In fact, we were among them before we even knew what had happened. We looked around and listened, but there was no sign of the creature. It must have taken us half an hour to find our way through or around the briars and back to the highway. Looking back at it now, it was an adventure, but one that scared the crap out of me. We returned home and made no mention of it to our parents. After all, they didn't really need to know just how far we'd gone that day. Thanks for reading. Signed, Tommy. And there it is. All I have for tonight. Now, I gotta admit, reading these true reports has left even me with more questions than answers. I'd love to hear your thoughts, opinions, and theories about these in the comments down below. Just please, keep them respectful as the submitters may read these. And if you're new to the channel, please hit the subscribe button and ring the notification bell. It really helps out the channel. So anyways, thanks so much for watching. And until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, stay safe, and I'll be seeing you on down the road a ways. Biker out.